welcome to Faith and Honest Conversation. I'm Thomas Rowland. This is James. James Fallon. Hi, James. We met as we when we trained to be counsellors, and we're here just to honestly explore, discuss, share our experience and understanding of faith and spirituality and all those sorts of things. So this week we kind of thought we'd move into think about faith in practice. So kind of how is it in our everyday experience and actions and lives, like how do we experience it? So James, do you want to start us off?
I can do it. I think the thought for this, or I suppose the inspiration for this, came from when we were talking a bit about taboos, and we we're looking at wealth and the disparities between poor people and those with more, and how we encounter that in our everyday lives, and I suppose it's sort of like springs from a place of, well, it's not just my spirituality that drives me to. Oh, hang on. Just as this is coming out, it's like, oh no, but it is, but it isn't. It's all changing shape in my head. I suppose I feel sort of like an urge to help or to respond to a need if I see a need, and I suppose, like, to an extent, you could say that's spirituality, or that's my humanity, and then my argument would be, well, what's the difference? If we're spiritual beings, then we're all spiritual beings, and so if somebody responds but they don't profess to have a faith, it's still like the fact that they're human is responding to the fact they're seeing a need. The fact that they're recognizing. So it's on a higher plane, isn't it? It's on and also on a more visceral side of things than I want to be a good person, so I will do X, Y, Z. It's not so logical as that. And I suppose that I still don't know how to respond. I will respond by offering to buy food, or directing people to places that they can go, or and all these sorts of different things. But what I'm really wanting is for them to have some form of inner peace, some form of inner satisfaction, which I suppose only comes from in my experience has only come to me through my faith, through my spiritual experience, and I don't know how to give that. I want to very much, and I know that it's free, and I know that it's available, and I know that at least as far as I believe, anybody can experience and anybody can have that. But it's not something that I was given, but something that I received. Not something that somebody gave me, but it's something that I've received, but I have no way to impart, if that makes sense. And I guess it comes up a lot in my everyday life, with anybody who I'm with, and particularly, from a counselling point of view. I don't practice as a counsellor at present, but when I was, what I was hoping for people was that they'd find that inner peace through some form of connection with themselves, with the inner spirituality, with the inner element of God or divinity. That's a lot of words to say that I want somebody to experience what I've experienced, I think.
That's so fascinating, James. And I'm thinking, because we've talked about evangelism in the past, and how 90% of what you're saying reminds me of evangelism. Except for the bit where you say you don't know how to give it, or you can't.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, and that real what's the word? Frustration almost, or like it can't that desire can't be fulfilled to give it to somebody else. And I'm also thinking, what was I also thinking? It's kind of this is in the broader context. I'm seeing it anyway. I'm loving the birds that I'm hearing. We've got birds in the background.
Yeah,
really
is that? Oh, it's on my side. Yeah, they're very noisy.
What was I going to say? The broader context of kind of how if you're somebody with this faith or spiritual side of you that is appreciated, that is accessed, and experienced, how do you then be with other people where that isn't the experience, or that isn't seemingly part of their experience? And I don't want to say non-spiritual, because I agree with you in that, you know, we're human, we're all spiritual, or if any of us are spiritual, we're all spiritual. But you know, how do you be with that, and is there a way of and that desire to impart, or that desire to meet somebody at that level?
And a part of me knowing that, you know, it doesn't solve all of your problems, having a connection, but it certainly puts things in perspective, or it can help to put things in perspective. Like I just think from my own experience, you know, that I went from being very, very miserable and very like nihilistic about life, and despairing in a lot of ways because there was no hope, as far as I could see, to suddenly having this, everything's going to be okay. It didn't, no matter what, everything is going to be okay. And I think ultimately that's my that's the one of the big sort of foundations for me of my faith, is that not the knowledge that if it's not okay yet, it's all right. It will be. It will be okay. I think that it comes up in is it the Best Marigold Hotel? I don't know if you've seen that film, but that one of the characters in there said it's everything will be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end. And sort of like this sort of concept that it's, you know, we're on a journey to wherever it is we're going, and wherever it is we're going, it's all going to be okay. And so and wanting that like, you know, we talked about in counselling having those basic, very, very basic needs met, of like the sort of our self-worth and security being met, and our significance being met, that sort of sense of being belonging and having purpose and having worth, and that's all, I've only found that truly from my spiritual connection, and of course, you know, we get it from each other, and we get it to an extent from each other, but it's not perfect, and it doesn't satiate us in the same way, because it's like it's experienced but not felt, if that makes sense. It's like we can see it, but we can't really feel it, maybe.
There's this sense that actually, in my experience of spirituality and faith, it meets a lot of my, I don't like the terminology, but it meets a lot of my needs in a way that nothing else has. And to the extent that they are satiated, whereas, you know, without my faith, I've never experienced them satiated before. Like they've never been fulfilled or satisfied in any other context. And then it's like, well, if that's true for me, is it true for everybody else? And I want that for others. And yet I'm thinking also like how what I'm thinking, why is it that we want that for others? That may sound a silly question, but
no, not at all.
In the sense of like, yeah, because I say this, James, because I've been in so many evangelism meetings where we make out that we want it because we're good Christians that love everybody. And I'm not at all saying you're not, although you're probably great against being called a good Christian. So that, but
certainly a part of me does.
Yeah, but like, yeah, I'm interested in, is that what is it that we want here? Because we don't want to impose something.
Yeah.
And this fundamentally cannot be imposed, otherwise it's not it.
Yes, exactly. I suppose it's when somebody's asking me for something that, like on a deeper level, I suppose that that what they're asking for on the surface doesn't reflect what the true need is, what the true want is, what that that unsatisfied part of themselves, and I think certainly for somebody who's homeless or like on the poverty line and this sort of thing, there are very, very basic needs that really do need to be met, and it's really important for us to respond to that, because it's something that our, I think, society has innately inbuilt is poverty, and a disparity between rich and poor. And I think, Jesus says, "But care for the poor, for they'll always be with you," which, I mean, like, is probably one of the saddest things he's ever said. Like the idea that we can't ever solve poverty, and I guess it kind of stemmed from a place of, well, the causes of poverty, although there are some systemic things like society and all of this sort of stuff, but there are deeper things as well, like abuse and other issues that and mental health problems and all of these sorts of things that can contribute, which we can't control and we can't really change, or we can make an allowance for, but we can't prevent, because there are, by nature, us being human, there are people who will tend towards cruelty in certain situations and this sort of stuff. So where was I going with that? I started somewhere. What was it you asked me again?
Yeah. So what is it
What is it I want to give people?
Yeah. What is it you want, or why is it you want to give?
Why is it I want to give? I suppose that with all of these things, if you're struggling with homelessness, if you're struggling with like mental health issues, or suffering from abuse, or have suffered from abuse, that having a sense of inner peace and inner belonging, or being loved, or anything like that, or being acceptable in some ways, is probably might be so far removed from what your lived experiences is, that's by far and away the greatest thing that you could experience. And it's certainly for me, it was the greatest experience of my life, is that knowledge of, oh, I'm not just loved but liked. I'm not just accepted but wanted. And yeah, it's quite yeah, yeah, it is. I suppose it's a big assumption on my part, thinking, oh well, they can't feel that if they're. But I suppose it's maybe not such a jump of an assumption. If somebody's asking for help, it's because they they perceive they have a need, and yeah, and responding to that need is great. But the thing is, it's like the issue is that you've got you're like trying to fill up the bathtub, but the plug's out, so you're not really solving the problem by adding more water. The key is to put the plug back in, and that's it. And I suppose what I'm wanting to do is like, actually, if the plug's in, then that's when your cup can start to refill, and your bathtub can start to refill. Yeah. Does that make sense?
What is the plug?
I suppose for me it's my spiritual relationship, which I know I can't give anybody my spiritual relationship, but I know that there is one that they can have a relationship with that has so much more to give than I have, and so much more power than I have, and yeah, and then it's and I suppose that part of me giving to them in their immediate needs of like food or shelter or clothing or whatever it is that I can help with, is showing some of the love that I've experienced, and maybe that's the best expression of my relationship that I can give, because I can't give them what I have, and what truly would make a difference, maybe. All right, that's very. It feels very like wrapped up in a lot of assumptions on my part, and I don't know. There's probably like yeah, no, there's definitely part of me that's sort of working through that at the moment. Like, am I assuming that they need this and need that, and assuming that they need a spiritual connection? That's something that I believe that everybody needs, is that can only benefit everybody. But equally, I believe that counselling can only benefit everybody. But at the same time, I know there's a right time and place for that. I don't know. I'm messed up and confused about it all, I think, is where I come out to with it all.
Yeah, and I guess I'm interested in thinking. Because I'm really struck how you can be really clear, James. You can be really clear on your faith, is what I'd say. And then how in the real world, in a situation, things get so befuddled.
Yeah.
And I think that's real life. I think that really is real life, because yeah, because once you're immersed in real life, it's full of all of our histories and all of the pressures and the other person and everything that's going on. I guess I'm feeling I think where we came to when we talked about poverty was being able to, maybe the greatest thing we can do is just be with them and have a conversation and be human with them. And I'm thinking, it takes to accept them or to cherish them as human isn't often the done thing, in my experience, because we want to push them away. And so I kind of think like the capacity that any of us have, which is a broad sweeping statement, but I'll go with it. Like, if we have a capacity to meet somebody who threatens us, who threatens our sense of who we are, who is different, if we have that capacity to meet them, that's because of our faith, in whatever guise that faith is taken, like in whatever it's a faith that you're okay, and I can hold this, and I can hold kind of being close to you. And if we go back to kind of like faith as kind of this between fear and love, and I see faith as connecting, coming in contact with more of ourselves, more of other people, more of the world, perhaps more of God, and or avoiding it. That's defining my faith, and so I think what we can't do is give somebody faith, but we can be open to offering an experience of okayness. Where we meet somebody else in their humanity.
Yeah, I can follow you.
And I think, so like me giving money to somebody is going to do very little to their long-term outlook, if you like, or long-term kind of. But that could be an expression or a meeting of our humanity. It's like, you've touched me, I've been touched by you. And I can see a need. This is what I have. Or this is my response to that. Equally, a conversation can be that. And I kind of think that is that's much more powerful than anything else that goes on in my head of what I wish I could do or feel I should do or whatever. Is that making sense? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. It's like almost, yeah. I relate to that on the fact that it's sort of like by being there, by taking a moment, by listening, by giving money, food, whatever it is that you give, and time included, time and listening and so on. That is almost a touch point, isn't it, of humanity, of a touch point of spirituality there. And I suppose it's true with every person, and like every meeting that we have, but it's more raw in the scenario where you're meeting somebody who's struggling with poverty, because you've got it, because it's such an obvious need, such a raw need there. That's very on the surface. That's very seen. And maybe why I feel uncomfortable as well, because it's unhidden, because it's on show. It's like it does reflect us all, in that we all have like great needs at different times in our life, and because for different reasons, that maybe that's why it's sort of why sometimes we might find it difficult to respond, because we're so aware that this could be my experience. This could be, we see ourselves, or we can see, like a reflection of what we could be like, or where we could be, and it makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm also wondering if there's, with everyday encounters, there is always the ability to, or there is always the option to hide. or to not reveal something. And I think that's an important option that we have. That, we get to choose when we reveal those parts of us we're really embarrassed or ashamed or about. And as a counsellor, I really want people to share those, because I think it can be so healing to have that experience of sharing it and find out it's not so awful. But equally, it's very important, I think, for someone to be able to have that choice of when to share it and when to be, to be able to gauge, is this a safe place to expose this, and have power over that. I think it's important. I think that's part of yeah. So and so when you're with somebody who's whose shame or anguish or fears are just so exposed, it's a very different sort of approach, isn't it? Like with normal encounters, you have your respect for the other person and for their dignity involves your respect for them to keep things private, if that's what you want. How do you approach somebody who cannot keep something private?
Yeah, because that's been stripped away, that ability.
With dignity. That's what came to my mind when you were talking about it's so raw. And I guess usually maybe part of our looking away is part of that giving them dignity, or that kind of learnt way to give dignity, learnt way to.
Yeah, and I suppose it kind of, it also looks like you're not wanting to get involved, because like the looking away is sort of like a dismissive in a respect as well, in certain respect. So it's a real challenge, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. It is, and I think this is why I've stopped beating myself up in these moments, or trying to stop beating myself up, because it's discerning what strand is pulling me which way is actually very difficult, and probably I've got 1,000 knotted strands pulling me both ways. But it doesn't help with knowing what to do necessarily. And there's also that desire to know what to do, or desire to be helpful, to touch in a helpful way.
And I think that big part of it is the sense in ourselves of feeling helpless isn't very comfortable. It's not a particularly comfortable place to be, and that's sort of like another touch point of empathy with the person who you're with. There's a possibility that they feel particularly helpless in certain areas and certain parts of their lives, and it's sort of a reflection of where they're at, and they makes it doubly challenging, I suppose. Yeah, it's an odd one. It's funny because it's sort of like for me I don't know what else is a lived out expression of my faith, except for, and I say that except for, it's not. I'm not trying to belittle it or make it smaller. My tendency is to try to treat people how I would want to be treated, which is partly why I will stop for somebody who's in the streets. Because if it was me, I'd want somebody to stop. And then I don't know what I would want from then on, which is why it's really challenging for me to go, oh, well, I'm going to offer you this, even though you've asked for that or whatever, I'm going to give you this rather than that. It's very, kind of like a bit of a minefield. But certainly, like in the day to day, I will try and treat somebody with as much respect and as much dignity as I can, because that's exactly how I'd want somebody to treat me. Yeah, it's really difficult. I don't know. I don't know how else my faith does manifest itself or come out apart from in that sort of those two ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I think meeting people in distress is a real big thing, particularly for us who, we chose to be counsellors. That's become a big part of who we are and what we're passionate about. And I feel how it feels unsatisfactory how we kind of where we've got to with how to be with somebody who's asking for money, let's say. It doesn't feel it doesn't feel like we've answered it. I guess I'm wondering. I guess I'm also wondering what are the impact of, or what are the things we're not trying to do maybe anymore, where our faith comes into contact with our every day. So, what so I know I was really aware with your story of, you've been in a place where you've given too much in the past for those that needed help, and so I'm wondering how much does that play a part in how you are with
how boundaried I am with people, and I think
and then kind of broadening it, like what are the things we're not doing anymore when it comes to our faith in practice.
I suppose a bit. I think you're right with regards to where I've been in the past, and having burnt myself out, sort of giving, and it not like it making a difference, but again it being like that turn tap on into a bath without the plug in. It's sort of like very, very challenging to then allow myself to be in a position where I give in the same way. And so I suppose now there's a part of me that's sort of very reluctant. I've been talking to my partner Jen about, doing volunteering or like going and helping out with like there are various different charities that are dotted around the area I live, and getting involved in one or more of them. Some of which I was involved in when I was a part of the church. And there's something like, there's a part of me that sort of thinks, oh, that seems like a really good idea. Another part of me that sort of like kicks against it and thinks, I don't know. There's a very cynical part of me that doesn't agree with charity and the way charities work and this sort of thing, and they feel like they're self-perpetuating and they don't really solve the issue. But as I say, a very cynical part of me that is thankfully not the whole thing. There's another part of me that sort of like is wary of going to do something like that because of where I've ended up in the past, but sort of kind of intrigued by the idea of doing it with a larger charity where there's maybe a little bit more structure in place to so that I wouldn't get burnt out and that sort of stuff. And coupled with the fact another voice saying that, do I even need to do it through a charity? Is it possible to just be me in everyday life? And maybe the charity's the right way to do it, because it just kind of gives me structure as well as other people's structure. So there's kind of a double benefit to that one. But I don't know. Yeah, it's an odd one, very odd one.
Yeah, I feel a lot of that with charity work and volunteering, and I have to say I've completely. I'm in a place where I've removed myself from any sort of volunteering because I don't think I have capacity. So, and I'm just as you were talking, I was thinking, I love two things. I loved how you talk about different parts of you, and how I think there's a myth, maybe especially in sort of faith circles, that you kind of have this Christian part or faith part that is just knows what to do, is Mahatma Gandhi in the world or whatever, and actually the reality is that even the parts that are really maybe all of our parts, I don't know, but even our parts that are really faith, have faith, or however you want to phrase it, part of our faith can be pulling in completely contradictory ways.
Yeah. 100%.
And that's real experience. That's how we live. And I was also wondering, when we have these conversations of faith and practice, we kind of we focused, and I think I would naturally on, how do I help other people? How do I better the world in some way, or bring healing or redemption or something into the world? And actually, I'm wondering, how, when you were talking about, and you used it a couple of times with the analogy of the bath, the tub, it's kind of what place is looking after myself? What place does helping me have faith and spirituality? Is it so noble? And if we take the bath analogy seriously, it's really noble. Like we just can't give anything unless we have a full tub.
Yeah.
Or unless like there is nothing to give. There is no way of being in the world in a beneficial way. If we don't have if we don't have ourselves filled or looked after or cared for in some way. So I guess I'm interested that doesn't feature, or that hasn't featured.
How do you mean? Like, so I haven't talked about that, or it doesn't feature in everyday life as part of our spiritual.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm not pinning it on you at all. I'm kind of thinking this is reminiscent of many such conversations of how do we be Christian in the world, or how do we whatever, why is it that looking after ourselves doesn't feature as something so spiritual?
Yeah, and does that come from like an inherent guilt through that created or sort of learnt or inherited through upbringing and or environment, or is that like a deep inbuilt part of us and part of our nature? I don't know. That's a really good question, and you're right. I think that it has to like the looking after and loving ourselves is also a very, very important part, if not as important. And probably the thing that I would say I probably neglect the most, and yet if I was with a friend or talking to somebody else, is like I'd want them to be looking after themselves. So being making sure that they're okay. And for myself, it's not like a priority. And why is that? That's a really good question. I really like that. And it also I do get like a sense of guilt when I'm doing something that's just me, or that feels like it's a bit selfish, or a bit not thinking of other people, or not like taking them into account. Then that can feel uncomfortable, so I won't do it, and so then I don't look after myself so well. And so I suppose again, it for me, a lot of it probably comes down to boundaries with myself. Is like what I will allow for myself and what I won't allow for myself. And they're quite uncontrolled boundaries, I think. So some where it's too boundaried, and some where it's not boundaried enough, and I suppose that's a part of it. I suppose so. For example, like relaxing for myself is quite a good way for me just to recuperate and to be in a good place. But then, do I take that too far? Do I do it to excess and that sort of stuff? And various other things like I won't let myself do that because I will, I know I'll just overindulge, so I won't do it at all. And so it's become quite I suppose ascetic with the ways I sort of look after myself in certain areas, but not in others at all. So I'm just trying to think of an example that's sort of I can't. It's not easy for me to sort of like come up with an example off the top of my head really with it. But that there are probably areas of my life where I don't help myself as much as I could. Okay, so yeah, this is a good example. If I have a day off or something like that, I know that creativity really helps me, and it is a really good way for my brain just to kind of do its thing and be happy, and makes me feel good. But I don't go out of my way to do the creativity, and there are various things that hold me back from it, and like an initial energy input required on my part to get myself started or to have like a project going. And so I don't do a lot of creativity on my days off, even when I want to. So, but I'll spend my time doing other stuff that is much less energy intensive, like reading, for example, which I still really enjoy, but it won't have the same impact. Won't benefit me and or other people as much by me doing that. So that's like a clumsy example, but that sort of thing. Yeah, I think so.
I feel we can get wound up in guilt with these things.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I think that's. I'm finding this. It's really hard to talk about, and I think it is because of that. I think there's this kind of shadow of guilt over everything, and it's making me go, oh, I don't really know. Is that right? I'm starting to question everything and challenge myself on everything. Yeah, it's quite difficult, isn't it? I think it's maybe there is for me a perception of what my spiritual life ought to look like and what it does look like, and they're very, very different. And as a result, I feel there's a sense of feeling guilty, but I don't know where that perception of what I think it should look like comes from. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, interesting.
I think certainly in my background, I've had, there's a lot of this talk about keep striving or keep, pushing, improving your spirituality or holiness or whatever. Keep, it gets overflowing to bursting because it's constantly never enough. And I think I know I'm. I think I know when a sign that I'm struggling in my in how I am, or that I'm a bit low, is when I start feeling that guilt again, that I should be like this or should be like that or should be. And actually, what I need at that point is to conk out. I don't need to be trying to do something at that point. My natural tendency is to go even more to try harder, wash up, keep myself up, etc. I think as you were talking, I was just thinking maybe what you need to do on your days off is just something that isn't strenuous.
Yeah, I'd give myself permission. Yeah,
give yourself permission.
Yeah.
And can't that be part of our spirituality, that that we have permission to do nothing, or to achieve nothing, because it doesn't matter. We're liked and we're wanted. Even so, there's a phrase I heard it once from somebody. Apparently, Martin Luther in a letter wrote. What did he write? He wrote something like "sin proudly" or something. And I think it was and I feel like it's along these sorts of lines that not that I cast this as a sin, but that this that feels wrong maybe is our way of claiming that we're precious, whatever.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. And have a delight in the fact that we can do what others might consider wrong, but actually isn't. It's like, if you told somebody, they'd be like, "Oh, that seems like a waste of time," or like, "Why are you doing that?" sort of thing. But that is totally allowed, totally allowed, and totally like, that's, and I think you're right. I think I'm probably at, how I talk about the ebbs and flows with my faith. I'm probably at a bit of a low ebb at the moment, insofar as that's how I'm feeling is the guilt side of things. So I'm at that point where as you say, like I just can conk out and it's fine. don't need to worry. But there is a part of me that's sort of pushing forwards more. It's funny, isn't it? I did look at this a little bit with one of my counsellors. I think we took a lot of the metaphors of different parts of myself to an extreme and personified them all and this sort of thing to encourage internal conversation and that sort of idea, which is great, and it has been really, really helpful, and I love it because it's sort of follows in the line of systemic therapy, which I'm still absolutely amazed by. It's like some sort of wizardry. But yeah, it is really good, and it is really kind of. It's good to have that inner relationship and that inner. It's okay to. I think it's funny actually because I personified my creativity as this sort of like glowing orb that I kept trying to grasp and it would fly away, and the allowing it to fly away and only land when it's ready was quite a peak element of my counselling. So yeah, it is all right to do nothing. I like that. It's very good.
And I'm intrigued by that with your spirituality as well. Like it feels very spiritual, that glowing orb, and I think creativity is part of how you experience spirituality, and I do too. And there is something about, well, I'm not in control of that glowing orb.
Yes. Yeah.
Like peak experiences or experiencing my faith aren't things that I can control. They don't come when I read my Bible and then pray or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
They are grace. Is maybe the Christian word. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think there's something in that theology of grace that. It's never going to be that you do X, Y, Z and then you feel wonderful, or you're suddenly in touch with God much more, or in touch with whatever this beating heart of us is.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly it. Is grace is that thing that I'm like kind of go, oh yeah, that's right. That's right. That's where it needs to be.
Great. Shall we leave it here, James? Have you got anything else you want
to? Not that I can think of. I think that's a really good place to leave it, actually. On grace.
On grace.
On grace. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you another week.